A wealthy millionaire with ulterior motives offers shelter to two homeless women who have just arrived in the city. Convinced he can manipulate and exploit their vulnerability, he sets his plan in motion. But what he doesn't know is that these women are far from ordinary, and the shocking truth they reveal will leave him reeling. Stay tuned to discover how the tables are turned in a way no one could have predicted. Don't forget to like and comment where you are from. The Millionaire's Proposal. The bustling city lights gleamed against the backdrop of a crisp winter evening. James Cartwright, a wealthy real estate mogul, sat in the comfort of his sleek black limousine. The world outside his tinted windows seemed distant, almost unreal. As the vehicle rolled down the dimly lit streets near the city's edge, James's sharp eyes caught sight of two women huddled together on a street corner. Their ragged clothes and the battered suitcase at their feet told the story of their struggles. He smirked, adjusting the gold cufflinks on his tailored suit. Opportunity, he thought. This was exactly the kind of situation where his charm and resources could be used to his advantage. James signaled his driver to stop. The limousine came to a slow halt near the curb, drawing the women's attention. He stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. His charismatic smile radiated a deceptive warmth. "Ladies," he began, his voice smooth and reassuring, "you seem like you could use a little help." The women exchanged a wary glance. One of them, a young woman with curly brown hair, stepped forward. Her name was Ellie. She looked at James, her hazel eyes filled with a mix of hope and suspicion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice cautious. James offered a sympathetic nod. "Someone who believes in second chances. I couldn't help but notice you out here. I have a place, spare rooms, warm beds, food. It's nothing much, but perhaps it could help you get back on your feet." The second woman, an older figure with streaks of grey in her dark hair, remained silent. Her name was Clara. She studied James carefully, her sharp gaze trying to penetrate the facade of his polished exterior. "Why?" Clara finally asked. "Why would you help us? What's in it for you?" James chuckled softly, raising his hands as if to show he had nothing to hide. "Because I can, and because I know what it's like to start from nothing. Consider it my way of giving back." The women hesitated. Ellie glanced at Clara, clearly torn. The promise of warmth and safety was tempting, but there was something unsettling about the man's overly generous offer. James noticed their hesitation and pressed further. "Look, I can see you've had a rough time. No strings attached, just come with me for the night. If you don't feel comfortable, you're free to leave in the morning. What do you have to lose?" Ellie finally nodded, her resolve cracking. "All right," she said softly. Clara sighed, her instinct to protect Ellie pushing her to agree. "Fine," she muttered. "But just for the night." James smiled, opening the limo door with a flourish. "Welcome aboard." As the limousine drove off into the night, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they had just stepped into something far more complicated than it seemed. Ellie, on the other hand, leaned back in the plush leather seat, allowing herself a rare moment of hope. Little did James know, the decision to invite these women into his home would set into motion a series of events that would change his life forever, and not in the way he expected. A home of secrets. The limousine pulled up to the gates of James Cartwright's sprawling estate, its grandeur illuminated by an array of floodlights. The towering iron gates opened slowly, revealing a winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges. Ellie and Clara exchanged uneasy glances as the car came to a stop in front of the grand entrance. "Here we are," James said with a smile, stepping out first and gesturing toward the house. "Welcome to my humble abode." Ellie couldn't hide her amazement. The mansion was enormous, its columns gleaming under the soft glow of the exterior lights. Clara, however, remained guarded, her sharp eyes scanning their surroundings. "This is your house?" Ellie asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. James chuckled. "It's a bit much, I'll admit, but tonight it's your home too. Come on inside." As they stepped through the double doors, the warmth of the house enveloped them. The interior was just as opulent as the exterior, marble floors, ornate chandeliers, and walls adorned with priceless artwork. A housekeeper appeared silently, taking their coats and offering them slippers to replace their worn shoes. "I'll show you to your rooms," James said, leading them up the grand staircase. "You'll find everything you need here, fresh clothes, toiletries, whatever you like. And if there's anything missing, just let me know." He opened the door to a guest suite, revealing a lavish bedroom with a canopy bed, a plush armchair and a private bathroom. Ellie's eyes widened in awe. "This is for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "For tonight, yes," James replied. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about how I can help you long term." As James left them to settle in, Ellie collapsed onto the bed, her exhaustion catching up with her. Clara, however, remained standing, her arms crossed as she surveyed the room. "This doesn't feel right," Clara said softly. "No one's this generous without expecting something in return." Ellie sighed, leaning back against the pillows. "Maybe he's just a good person, Clara. Not everyone has bad intentions." Clara shook her head. "You don't get to his level without learning how to manipulate people. Be careful, Ellie. We don't know what he really wants." The night passed uneventfully, but Clara's instincts wouldn't let her rest. She woke early, quietly leaving the room to explore the house. As she wandered through the halls, she noticed doors that were locked and cameras discreetly placed in corners, their lenses watching every move. She made her way to the kitchen where she found James sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. He looked up, smiling when he saw her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Clara didn't answer immediately, instead pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I'm just not used to this kind of place," she said finally. "It's overwhelming." James nodded, his expression softening. "I get that, but I want you to know you're safe here." "Safe from what?" Clara asked, her tone sharper than she intended. James hesitated, then set his mug down. "From the cold, from the dangers out there. You've seen how harsh the streets can be. I just want to help." Clara studied him, her instincts still on high alert. "Why us?" she asked. "There are plenty of people out there who need help. Why pick us?" James's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Because I saw something in you too," he said smoothly. "Strength, resilience, I admire that." Before Clara could press further, Ellie entered the kitchen, her face lighting up when she saw the spread of breakfast on the counter. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, and fresh fruit were laid out as if for royalty. "Wow," Ellie said, grabbing a plate. "This is amazing. Thank you, James." James stood, his charming smile returning. "Anything for my guests. Eat up. We have a lot to discuss today." As Ellie dug into her food, Clara remained cautious. Something about James didn't sit right with her. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were pawns in a game she didn't yet understand. What Clara didn't know was that her suspicions were correct. James had a plan, and it had nothing to do with charity. Strings attached. The morning sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the dining room as James sat at the head of the long oak table. Ellie and Clara joined him, their plates filled with the lavish breakfast spread. James sipped his coffee, his demeanor as calm and polished as ever. "So," he began, placing his cup down, "I think it's time we talk about what brought you here and where we go from here." Ellie, eager to repay what she saw as kindness, spoke first. "We're so grateful for what you've done for us. If there's any way we can thank you, just tell us." James's smile widened. "I'm glad you said that, Ellie. Gratitude is a rare quality these days." Clara, on the other hand, remained silent, her fork idly pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. She didn't trust the sudden pivot in his tone. James leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped. "You see, I've been thinking. You both have something unique, a story that people would want to hear. With the right support, we could turn that story into an opportunity for you to rise above your circumstances." Ellie tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I'm offering you a chance to change your lives," James said, his voice smooth and persuasive. "I can help you secure jobs, housing, even education if you want it. But more importantly, I can give you a platform to share your journey through interviews, social media, perhaps even public appearances." Clara's gaze hardened. "What's in it for you?" James chuckled lightly, waving a hand. "Let's just say I see potential. In this world, perception is everything. Helping you succeed reflects positively on me as well. It's a win-win. Wait, you want us to go public with our story? Ellie asked, her brows furrowing slightly. That's a lot. It is, James admitted, but think of the impact you could make. You could inspire others, bring attention to the struggles of those on the streets. And of course you'd be compensated. Financially, you'd never have to worry again. Clara set her fork down, her jaw tightening. So, we're just part of a PR stunt. James's smile faltered for a brief moment. It's more than that, Clara. It's about building a narrative of hope and redemption. The world loves a comeback story. Ellie glanced between Clara and James, torn. It doesn't sound so bad, Clara. If it helps us get back on our feet. Clara shook her head, her instincts screaming that there was more to this than James was letting on. You don't know what you're agreeing to, Ellie. Once we give him control of our story, we lose our voice. James raised his hands, his tone placating. Ladies, I'm not asking for control. This is your story to tell, your lives to lead. I'm merely offering the resources to make it happen. Clara wasn't convinced, and James could see it. He shifted tactics, addressing Ellie directly. Ellie, think of what this could mean for you. No more struggling, no more wondering where your next meal will come from. You'd have security, stability, and a chance to make a difference. Ellie hesitated, her resolve wavering. It's just a lot to think about. Of course, James said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smile. Take your time, the offer stands whenever you're ready. As the conversation ended, James excused himself, leaving Ellie and Clara alone at the table. Ellie turned to Clara, her voice low. Why are you so against this? He's giving us a way out. Because nothing comes without strings, Clara replied, her voice firm. People like him don't do anything unless it benefits them, and when they're done with you, they leave you worse off than before. Ellie sighed, frustrated. Not everyone is out to get us, Clara. Maybe it's time to trust someone for once. Clara didn't respond, but her expression remained guarded. She couldn't shake the feeling that James was playing a long game, one where they were the pawns. That evening, Clara decided to do some investigating. While Ellie slept, she quietly left their suite and began exploring the mansion again, this time more thoroughly. She checked doors, peeked into rooms, and examined the layout of the house. In one of the locked rooms, she noticed faint voices and the glow of a computer screen through the crack beneath the door. Pressing her ear against the wood, she caught snippets of a phone conversation. Yes, they're here. No, they don't suspect anything. Yes, I'll deliver exactly what we agreed on. Clara's blood ran cold. She didn't recognize the voice, but the implications were clear. Someone in the house, perhaps James himself, had ulterior motives. Quietly retreating to her room, Clara lay awake, her mind racing. She didn't know what James's endgame was, but she was certain of one thing. They needed to get out before it was too late. A tangled web. The following morning, the mansion seemed to hum with an unnatural calm. James was absent from breakfast, leaving Ellie and Clara to dine in uneasy silence. Ellie was eager to discuss James's proposal, while Clara struggled to decide how much of her late-night discovery to share. I don't understand your hesitation, Ellie said, sipping her coffee. He's offering us a chance to rebuild our lives. Why are you so determined to paint him as a villain? Clara lowered her fork, her voice sharp but controlled. Because I heard him on the phone last night. Someone's involved in this, someone he's talking to. They said we don't suspect anything. Ellie frowned, confusion crossing her face. You're sure it was James? I didn't see who it was, Clara admitted, but it was coming from a locked room, and it wasn't good. Ellie, you need to think about this. He's not helping us out of kindness. He's helping us because he wants something. Ellie looked down at her plate, her fingers fidgeting with her napkin. Maybe, but what if we're wrong? What if he really does just want to help? It's not like we have better options. Clara leaned in, her voice firm. That's exactly what he's counting on. Desperation makes us easy to manipulate. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of James, his polished demeanor as intact as ever. Good morning, ladies, he said with a smile, taking his seat. I trust you both slept well. Ellie nodded hesitantly, while Clara offered a curt, fine. James clasped his hands, addressing them both. I hope you've had time to consider my offer. I understand it's a lot to process, but I assure you, this could be the start of something extraordinary for both of you." Ellie opened her mouth to respond, but Clara cut in. "Before we agree to anything, we need more information. Who was on the phone last night?" James blinked, caught off guard for a split second before his smile returned. "I wasn't aware I needed to explain my personal conversations, Clara." "You do when we're part of whatever deal you're making," she shot back. "If we're going to trust you, we need full transparency." James sighed, his tone softening. "Clara, I understand your caution, truly, but I assure you my conversation had nothing to do with you. I have business interests, as any man in my position does, and some of those require discretion. It's unrelated to the opportunities I'm offering you." Clara didn't buy it, but she also knew she wouldn't get any more out of him now. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, while Ellie hesitated, torn between their perspectives. James sensed the tension and decided to change tactics. "Why don't I show you what I have in mind?" he suggested. "A little tour, if you will. It might help you understand the bigger picture." Ellie nodded eagerly, while Clara reluctantly agreed, her suspicion unshaken. James led them to his home office, a sprawling room filled with bookshelves, modern furniture, and cutting-edge technology. On a large screen mounted to the wall, he displayed a slideshow of marketing materials, images of Ellie and Clara from the previous day's dinner, digitally enhanced to appear polished and professional. "These could be the faces of a campaign," James explained, gesturing to the screen, "a message of hope, resilience, and transformation. With the right team behind you, we could make a real impact." Ellie's eyes widened as she took in the images. "You've already started." "Only mock-ups," James assured her. "I wanted to illustrate the possibilities. With your permission, we'd refine the messaging and ensure it aligns with your story." Clara remained silent, her arms crossed tightly. Something about the presentation felt off, calculated, even predatory. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being packaged, turned into a commodity for James's benefit. "Why us?" Clara asked finally. "Out of all the people you could help, why choose us?" James smiled, his expression almost paternal. "Because you represent something rare. Authenticity. Your struggles, your resilience, they resonate. People connect with stories like yours, and through that connection, we can achieve something remarkable." "Remarkable for who?" Clara pressed. "For everyone involved," James replied smoothly. "You, me, and countless others who will be inspired by your journey." Ellie seemed captivated by the idea, but Clara's instincts screamed that something wasn't right. She needed more information, proof of James's intentions. That night, while Ellie slept, Clara ventured back into the mansion. She avoided the main hallways, moving through the servants' corridors she had noticed earlier. Her goal was clear, the locked room where she had overheard the phone conversation. When she reached the door, Clara pressed her ear against it, straining to hear any sound. The room was silent, but a faint light glowed beneath the doorframe. She tried the handle, but it was locked. Clara pulled a bobby pin from her pocket and worked it into the lock, her heart pounding. After a few tense moments, the lock clicked, and the door creaked open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, dominated by a large desk cluttered with papers, files, and a computer. Clara scanned the room quickly, her eyes landing on a folder labeled Project New Dawn. She opened it, her stomach sinking as she read the contents. Contracts, marketing plans, and financial projections detailed a campaign that would use Ellie and Clara's stories as the centerpiece, but not in the way James had portrayed. The language was cold, clinical, describing them as assets and narrative vehicles for a larger branding effort aimed at enhancing James's public image. As she flipped through the documents, Clara found a draft press release announcing a partnership between James's company and a prominent media outlet. The headline read, "Philanthropic visionary rescues women from streets, inspires millions." Her blood boiled. This wasn't about helping them. It was about elevating James, using their pain as a stepping stone for his own gain. Clara took photos of the documents with her phone and carefully replaced everything as she had found it. As she slipped out of the room, she resolved to confront James, but not before sharing the truth with Ellie. The next morning, Clara woke Ellie early, her voice urgent. We need to talk. Ellie groaned, sitting up groggily. What is it now? Clara showed her the photos on her phone, detailing everything she had found. As Ellie read, her expression shifted from confusion to anger to disbelief. I knew there was a catch, Clara said bitterly. He's using us, Ellie. This isn't about helping, it's about him. Ellie's hands trembled as she handed the phone back. What do we do? We get out of here, Clara said firmly. Today, before he traps us any further. Ellie hesitated, her gaze flickering to the luxurious surroundings. But where will we go? Clara placed a hand on her shoulder. Anywhere but here. We'll figure it out, like we always do. But we can't stay. Ellie nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. Together they began to pack their belongings, preparing to leave the gilded cage before it could close around them entirely. The escape plan. Clara and Ellie packed in tense silence, their movements hurried but precise. The mansion, which once seemed like a safe haven, now felt like a trap closing in around them. Clara's mind raced with contingency plans, each more desperate than the last. We'll slip out during lunch, Clara whispered, zipping up her bag. It's the only time James isn't hovering over us. Ellie hesitated, clutching a small bag of her own. What if he notices we're gone before we make it far enough? He has cameras, staff. There's no way this place isn't monitored. Clara's jaw tightened. We'll have to take that risk. Staying here isn't an option, Ellie. Not after what I found. Ellie nodded reluctantly, her eyes darting toward the door. What if we're wrong? What if there's some explanation for all of this? Clara grabbed her by the shoulders, her voice low but firm. Ellie, he's using us. Those documents were clear. He doesn't see us as people, just tools to boost his image. Do you really want to wait and see what he does when we're no longer useful to him? Ellie shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I thought maybe this could be different. Clara's expression softened, and she pulled Ellie into a brief hug. I know, I did too, but we can't afford to be naive. As the clock ticked toward noon, Clara and Ellie made their way to the dining room, their bags hidden in a closet near the front door. James greeted them warmly, his polished demeanor intact. Good afternoon, ladies, he said, gesturing for them to sit. I hope you're hungry. The chef outdid himself today. Clara forced a polite smile as she took her seat. Ellie's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. James noticed and tilted his head, his sharp eyes narrowing. Is everything all right? You seem a bit on edge. Clara jumped in before Ellie could respond. We didn't sleep well last night. I think all the excitement is catching up with us. James nodded, his smile returning. Understandable. Transitions can be overwhelming, but I promise you're in good hands here. Clara's stomach churned at his words, but she kept her expression neutral. She glanced at Ellie, giving her a subtle nod. They had agreed to wait until James was distracted before slipping away. Halfway through the meal, James excused himself to take a phone call, leaving Clara and Ellie alone. The moment the door closed behind him, Clara leaned in. Now, she whispered. Ellie hesitated, her eyes darting toward the doorway. What if... Now, Ellie, Clara hissed, grabbing her arm. Let's go. The two women bolted from the dining room, their footsteps muffled on the plush carpet. They retrieved their bags from the closet and made their way to the front door, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Just as they reached the exit, a voice behind them stopped them cold. Going somewhere? They turned to see James standing in the hallway, his expression unreadable. His calm demeanor had been replaced with something colder, more calculating. Ellie froze, but Clara stepped forward, her voice steady. We're leaving. This isn't what we signed up for. James raised an eyebrow, his hands clasped behind his back. I see. And what exactly do you think you've uncovered that justifies this dramatic exit? Clara held up her phone, the photos of the documents still displayed on the screen. I know about Project New Dawn. You're not helping us. You're exploiting us. James's lips curved into a faint smile, but his eyes were hard. Ah, so you've been snooping. Impressive initiative, Clara, but you've misunderstood. I don't think I have, Clara shot back. You don't care about us. You're just using our stories to make yourself look good. James took a step closer, his voice low and measured. What I care about is results. Yes, I've planned to use your stories, but not in the way you think. This is about creating change, real, impactful change. Your experiences are powerful, and together we could do something extraordinary. At what cost? Clara countered. Our dignity, our freedom, no thanks. James sighed, his expression shifting to one of mild disappointment. You're making a mistake, Clara. You both are. Walking out now means giving up on everything I've offered. We'll take our chances, Clara said, gripping Ellie's arm. Move. James didn't block their path, but his parting words sent a chill down Clara's spine. You'll regret this. I promise you. The women didn't stop running until they were far from the mansion, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They flagged down a passing cab, collapsing into the back seat as it pulled away. Where to? The driver asked. Clara hesitated before giving the name of a small motel she had noticed earlier in the week. It wasn't much, but it would give them time to regroup. As the cab sped through the city, Ellie stared out the window, her expression haunted. Do you think he'll come after us? Clara glanced at her phone, her thumb hovering over the power button. I don't know, but we need to stay ahead of him. She powered off the device, knowing it was likely being tracked. For now, all they could do was stay vigilant and hope they had escaped James's grasp for good. But deep down, Clara knew the fight was far from over. James wasn't the kind of man who took no for an answer, and their decision to leave had likely set a much larger plan into motion. The aftermath. The dimly lit motel room felt suffocatingly quiet. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes scanning a map spread out on the small desk. Ellie paced back and forth near the window, peering through the curtains every few minutes. Stop looking, Clara said without turning her head. You're going to drive yourself crazy. Ellie dropped the curtain and crossed her arms. You really think he's going to just let us go? Someone like James doesn't just give up. Clara sighed, folding the map. I know he won't, but we've got to stay ahead of him. Ellie sat on the bed opposite Clara, her voice shaky. What if we made a mistake? What if he really was trying to help? Clara shot her a sharp look. Ellie, you saw the documents. He's not who he says he is. This was about his image, his control, not about us. But what now? Ellie asked, her voice cracking. We've got no money, no phones, and nowhere to go. Clara paused, her gaze softening. We stick together. We've made it this far. We'll figure it out. That night, Clara lay awake, her mind racing. Every sound outside made her tense, expecting to see James's polished shoes stepping into their motel room. She had seen the lengths people like him were willing to go to maintain control. He wouldn't let this go easily. The next morning, Clara ventured out early, leaving Ellie behind to rest. She wandered through the streets searching for a public library where she could access a computer without leaving a digital trail. When she finally found one, she logged into an encrypted email account she had set up years ago. I'm in trouble. Need safe transport and a place to regroup. Can you help? Clara hesitated for a moment before clicking send. She didn't know if her contact would respond, but it was her only shot at staying one step ahead of James. Back at the motel, Ellie jolted awake to the sound of a knock on the door. She froze, her heart pounding. Clara had warned her not to open the door for anyone, no matter what. The knock came again, louder this time. Ellie, it's me, Clara's voice called from the other side. Ellie rushed to open the door, relief washing over her. You scared me to death. Where were you? Getting help, Clara said, stepping inside and locking the door behind her. She pulled a small flip phone from her pocket. Burner, it's not traceable. Ellie frowned. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Clara snapped. She immediately softened her tone. We can't afford to ask too many questions right now. I reached out to someone who might be able to help us. Someone you trust? Ellie asked cautiously. Clara hesitated. I don't trust anyone completely, but it's better than waiting around for James to find us. That evening, Clara's burner phone buzzed. She answered quickly, her voice low. Yeah? Clara? A man's voice said. It's Leo. I got your message. Clara exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Leo, thank you. Where are you? He asked. "I can't say over the phone," Clara replied, "but I need safe transport out of the city." Leo hesitated. "You're in deep, aren't you?" "Deeper than I'd like to be," Clara admitted. "Can you help or not?" "I'll set something up," Leo said, "but it won't be cheap." "We'll figure it out," Clara said. "Just tell me when and where." The next day, Leo arranged for a driver to meet them in a discreet location. Clara and Ellie left the motel at dawn, keeping to side streets and alleyways to avoid being seen. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound a potential sign of pursuit. They reached the meeting point, a quiet parking lot behind an abandoned warehouse. A black SUV idled near the edge of the lot, its windows tinted. "You're sure about this?" Ellie asked, clutching her bag tightly. "No," Clara said, "but it's our best shot." The driver rolled down the window, revealing a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard. "You, Clara?" Clara nodded. "Leo sent you?" "Yeah," the man said, jerking his thumb toward the back seat. "Get in. We don't have much time." As they climbed into the SUV, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, scanning the empty lot one last time before the vehicle pulled away. Hours later, as they drove through the outskirts of the city, the driver's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening. "What is it?" Clara asked, her voice sharp. "Problem," he muttered. "There's chatter about a man looking for two women matching your description. Sounds like your guy." Clara's stomach sank. "How far behind is he?" "Hard to say," the driver replied. "But if he's serious about finding you, he won't stop." Clara exchanged a tense look with Ellie. The escape plan had bought them some time, but James was still on their trail, and now they were heading straight into the unknown. A reckoning in the shadows. The black SUV sped down an empty stretch of highway as Clara and Ellie sat in tense silence. The driver, whose name they still didn't know, kept checking the rearview mirror, his jaw set. Every now and then, Clara caught his hand twitching near the glove compartment where she guessed he kept a weapon. Clara finally broke the silence. "Where are you taking us?" "Somewhere safe," the driver replied curtly. "Leo's orders." "That's not an answer," Clara pressed, her voice edged with suspicion. The driver sighed, glancing at her in the mirror. "Safe house upstate. Remote, off the grid. You'll have time to figure out your next move." Clara leaned back, but her unease didn't fade. Ellie shifted uncomfortably beside her, her gaze fixed on the passing trees. Hours later, the SUV pulled off the highway and onto a gravel road that wound through dense woods. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. The road ended at a secluded cabin surrounded by towering pines. "This is it," the driver announced, stepping out of the vehicle. "Leo's contact stocked it with supplies. You should be good here for a while." Clara and Ellie climbed out, scanning their surroundings. The cabin was small but sturdy, with boarded windows and a padlocked door. It looked more like a survivalist hideout than a place of refuge. The driver handed Clara a key. "I'll be back in a few days to check on you. Stay inside, keep quiet, and don't use any electronics. If he's tracking you, we don't want to leave a trail." Clara nodded, pocketing the key. "Thank you." The driver tipped his head. "Stay sharp." He climbed back into the SUV and drove off, leaving them alone in the fading light. Inside the cabin, Clara and Ellie found a modest setup: 2 cots, a small kitchenette, and a wood-burning stove. A crate of canned goods and bottled water sat in the corner, along with a first aid kit and a flashlight. Ellie collapsed onto one of the cots, her exhaustion finally catching up to her. "What now?" Clara crouched by the crate, inspecting the supplies. "Now we wait. And we stay ready." Ellie pulled a blanket over herself, her voice muffled. "Do you think he'll find us?" Clara's jaw tightened. "He'll try, but if he does, we'll be ready." For the next few days, Clara and Ellie settled into an uneasy routine. Clara spent hours outside, scanning the perimeter and setting up makeshift alarms using string and tin cans. Ellie stayed inside, her nerves frayed by the constant tension. One evening, as Clara was returning from a perimeter check, Ellie met her at the door, her face pale. "I heard something." "What kind of something?" Clara asked, immediately alert. "A car," Ellie whispered. "It stopped on the road, but I didn't see anyone." Clara's hand went to the knife strapped to her belt. "Stay here." She stepped outside, the cool night air biting at her skin. The woods were eerily silent, the kind of quiet that made her stomach churn. She moved toward the road, keeping low and sticking to the shadows. A pair of tire tracks led up the gravel road but stopped short of the cabin. Clara crouched, her fingers brushing the fresh prints. Whoever it was, they hadn't gotten out of the vehicle, or if they had, they were careful not to leave a trace. Clara scanned the tree line, her eyes narrowing. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Back at the cabin, Ellie paced anxiously. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump, her heart pounding in her chest. When Clara returned, her expression was grim. "Someone was here," Clara said, her voice low. "They're testing us." Ellie's eyes widened. "What do we do?" Clara stepped closer, gripping Ellie's shoulders. "We hold our ground. This is the safest place we've got. If they come back, we'll be ready." That night, Clara stayed awake, her knife within arm's reach. She sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the dark woods outside. The hours dragged on, the silence punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Then she saw it, a faint glint of light, like a reflection off metal, deep in the trees. Her grip tightened on the knife as her heart raced. "Ellie!" she hissed, moving to wake her. "Get up! Now!" Ellie bolted upright, her fear evident. "What is it?" "We've got company," Clara said, grabbing the flashlight and motioning for Ellie to stay low. The glint of light vanished, replaced by the faint sound of footsteps crunching on leaves. Whoever it was, they were moving closer. Clara opened the cabin door silently, stepping out into the cold night. She moved toward the edge of the tree line, her movements deliberate and quiet. "Come out," Clara called, her voice steady. "I know you're there." The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice called out from the darkness. "Impressive instincts, Clara." Clara's blood ran cold. It was James. The final confrontation. The air was sharp with tension as Clara gripped her knife, her gaze locked on the shadowy figure emerging from the tree line. James stepped into the moonlight, his suit slightly rumpled, but his demeanor unnervingly calm. Behind him, two other men flanked his sides, their silhouettes imposing. "James," Clara said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "You've gone to a lot of trouble to find us." James gave her a slow smile, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. "You made it difficult. I don't like chasing loose ends, Clara. It's messy." "What do you want?" Clara demanded, edging closer to the cabin door where Ellie waited silently. "What I've always wanted," James replied, his tone smooth. "Control, closure, and perhaps a bit of retribution for the humiliation you've caused." Clara's grip on the knife tightened. "You brought this on yourself," James chuckled, shaking his head. "Still playing the righteous act. It's charming, really. But this is where it ends, Clara. I have no intention of letting you walk away again." He motioned subtly to the men beside him, who began advancing toward Clara. She held her ground, her mind racing with options. She couldn't let them reach Ellie. This was her fight to end. Inside the cabin, Ellie watched through the crack in the door, her breath hitching as the men closed in. Clara moved with calculated precision, her stance low and ready. Ellie clenched her fists, fear and frustration bubbling inside her. She hated feeling powerless. Her gaze darted to the crates of supplies in the corner. An idea struck her, a desperate one, but it was better than doing nothing. Quietly, she rummaged through the items, her hands trembling as she grabbed a flare gun. Outside, Clara made the first move. As one of James's men lunged, she sidestepped and delivered a swift kick to his knee, sending him sprawling. The second man swung a baton, but Clara ducked and countered with a sharp punch to his jaw. The fight was fast and brutal, her Navy SEAL training evident in every movement. James watched with a mix of amusement and irritation. "Impressive as ever," he remarked, clapping slowly. "But even you can't fight forever." "You'd be surprised," Clara shot back, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The man she had knocked down scrambled to his feet, charging at her again. Clara pivoted, slamming the hilt of her knife into his temple, knocking him unconscious. The second man hesitated, clearly rethinking his choices. James's smile faltered. "Useless," he muttered under his breath. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a handgun. "Enough games," James said, leveling the weapon at Clara. "You've made your point, now drop the knife and—" A blinding flash of light erupted from the cabin door as Ellie fired the flare gun. The projectile soared through the air, exploding in a brilliant burst of red and white. James staggered back, momentarily blinded, while Clara seized the opportunity. She lunged forward, disarming him with a swift twist of his wrist. The gun clattered to the ground, and Clara kicked it out of reach. James recovered quickly, throwing a punch, but Clara blocked it with ease, delivering a sharp elbow to his ribs. James doubled over, gasping for air. "You think this changes anything?" he wheezed, his bravado cracking. "You'll always be running." Clara leaned in, her voice low and fierce. "Not from you." She delivered a final blow, sending James collapsing to the ground unconscious. The fight was over. As the dust settled, Clara turned to see Ellie standing in the doorway, the flare gun still clutched in her hands. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "You okay?" Clara asked, stepping toward her. Ellie nodded, lowering the flare gun. "I wasn't going to let them take you." Clara gave her a small, proud smile. "You did good." The sound of approaching vehicles broke the quiet. Clara tensed, but relief washed over her as she saw the familiar black SUV pull up, followed by 2 police cruisers. The driver from before stepped out, his expression grim but determined. "Took you long enough," Clara said, her tone light despite the exhaustion in her voice. "We got your signal," the driver replied, motioning for the officers to secure James and his men. "You okay?" "We will be," Clara said, glancing at Ellie. "It's over." In the days that followed, news of James's arrest spread quickly. His empire crumbled as investigations uncovered a web of corruption and exploitation. Clara and Ellie cooperated with authorities, their testimonies instrumental in dismantling his network. For the first time in what felt like forever, they could breathe freely. Weeks later, Clara and Ellie stood outside a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. A fresh start. Clara had secured a new job, one that let her use her skills for good, while Ellie began taking classes at a local college. As they unpacked boxes in their new living room, Clara paused to glance at Ellie. "You know, we make a pretty good team." Ellie smiled, her eyes warm. "We survived James. I think we can handle anything." Clara nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Together. That evening, Clara recorded a video, her voice steady and filled with gratitude. "To everyone who's been following our story, thank you. This journey hasn't been easy, but it's shown us the power of resilience and the importance of standing together." She paused, her gaze steady. If this story inspired you, share it. Let someone else see that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to join a community that believes in second chances and fresh starts. As the video ended, Clara felt a sense of closure. She and Ellie had faced the unthinkable and come out stronger. Now they had a future to build, and they were ready for whatever came next.